Hello, everyone. I want to begin by thanking Prime Minister Draghi for welcoming us to Rome for this G20. There's always been a tremendously strong partnership between Italy and Canada, strong people-to-people ties, growing trade ties, and shared values, of course, are the cornerstone of our friendship and relationship. I also want to highlight that it was a moment in this G20 to recognize the incredible leadership that Angela Merkel has shown over the past 16 years as Chancellor. She has been such a strong voice on so many big international issues, a voice of strength, of wisdom, and she's been personally a really good friend to me and a font of advice, wisdom, and probing questions that have always helped me be more effective on the world stage. Le Canada est évidemment prêt à continuer de travailler avec nos partenaires du G20 sur les grands enjeux auxquels notre monde fait face. On est là pour collaborer, pour surmonter les grands défis ensemble, et c'est de ça dont nous avons discuté pendant ces rencontres aujourd'hui et hier. Of course, the big issue that we continued to address first was the recovery from COVID-19. We know that to beat COVID anywhere, we have to beat it everywhere, which is why we announced that Canada will donate 200 million doses to COVAX by the end of 2022. We're investing $15 million to the COVAX Manufacturing Task Force to support a tech transfer hub in South Africa. We've paid our fair share on the ACT Accelerator for testing, and we've also announced $982 million from special drawing rights to IMF's Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust, which will help the developing world recover from the impacts of this pandemic and grow the economies in positive ways for tomorrow. The big theme as well, speaking of tomorrow and the day after and the week to come, it was COP26, and discussions on the environment and the fight against climate change were woven through our sessions, in addition to the main session this morning on climate change and the environment. In 2015, Canada signed on to the Paris Agreement and made strong commitments about being a climate leader, not just at home, but in encouraging others around the world to continue to step up. Since then, we've brought in a strong, broad-based price on pollution. We've invested in clean tech and renewable energy. We've protected more of our land and oceans than ever before. When we came into office in 2015, just 1% of our coasts and oceans were protected. We're now at 14% and well on our way to 25 by 25 and 30% by 2030. On a aussi parlé de la responsabilité que nous avons tous d'éliminer le charbon, réduire l'utilisation et éliminer le charbon, de limiter nos émissions de méthane. Le Canada a pris des actions concrètes au cours des dernières années. Nous n'allons plus produire d'électricité par le charbon d'ici 2020. Et nous encourageons le monde à faire pareil, mais nous allons être là pour investir, pour aider le monde à en faire moins. Nous sommes commis à doubler notre financement pour le climat. We've doubled our climate financing commitment, a commitment we made in Paris that we've now doubled, and we've been working with partners like Germany and others to ensure that the world steps up to that $100 billion for climate financing that we know is going to be necessary if developing countries are able to be part of this transition, which we need them to be, or we face the catastrophic impacts of climate change. On a aussi parlé du rôle du secteur privé dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Il y a évidemment des profits à faire pour le secteur privé, mais surtout il y a des investissements qui vont être bons pour la planète que les différentes multinationales, le secteur privé est intéressé à faire. Le Canada fait partie de plusieurs groupes qui sont en train d'essayer d'encourager des investissements du privé dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques, et on va continuer de le faire. Obviously, you can't come to a G20 without talking about trade, strengthening and deepening progressive trade around the world continues to be one of the big goals that Canada has, as we've signed a number of strong trade deals over the past number of years that are really coming into their own. In my visit here to Italy and on Friday in the Netherlands, we talked a lot about how CETA in particular has increased opportunities both for Canadian businesses and businesses here in Europe to create deeper connections and more positive outcomes. We're going to continue to push on that for more good jobs and growth, which are good for the small and medium-sized businesses, good for workers, good for all of our economies. This G20 has been a lot of hard work, and we'll continue to do that work tomorrow with partners from around the world as we go to Glasgow to fight for a cleaner environment and fight against climate change. I'm looking forward to getting to it, but happy to take your questions right now.
Prime Minister Michael Couture with Global National. I want to ask you, how disappointed are you in the language, the watered-down language in this communique on climate change, especially when it comes to achieving net zero emissions by the year 2050?
There's no question that Canada, and along with a number of other countries, would have liked stronger language and stronger commitments on the fight against climate change than others. But we did make significant progress on recognizing 1.5 degrees as the ambition we need to share, on moving forward and identifying the phasing out of coal as an essential goal, on fighting and reducing methane emissions as being key, and also recognizing with the doubling of Canada's climate financing to the developing world how important it is that wealthy, successful countries in the industrialized world are there to support countries in the developing world to be able to make choices that will emit less and grow their economies. So there's work to do, and we're going to continue that work over the coming days with like-minded partners at COP.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Évidemment, le Canada aurait voulu du langage plus ferme et plus ambitieux dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques, avec d'autres pays qui le voulaient aussi. Mais la réalité, c'est que nous avons pu identifier l'ambition de 1,5 degré comme étant la cible que nous devons tous viser. Nous avons parlé de l'importance de réduire notre consommation pour l'éliminer éventuellement du charbon dans ce monde, de couper nos émissions de méthane. Nous avons continué de parler de la responsabilité que nous avons en tant que pays développés d'investir plus pour aider les pays en voie de développement à diminuer leurs émissions et faire des choix qui vont être moins nocifs pour l'environnement et pour notre avenir collectif. Le Canada a doublé ses engagements au niveau des investissements pour le climat, mais nous devons en faire plus et nous sommes là pour pousser cet enjeu-là demain et dans les jours à venir à la COP26.
Just as a follow-up, considering what has happened in this G20 on environment, how much of a cloud now hangs over COP26 and being able to declare it a success?
Well, first of all, we all know we need to do more to fight climate change. We hear it from kids in Canada and around the world. We hear it from business owners. We hear it from individuals worried about the future. We need to do more as individuals, as countries, and as a world. And that's what we're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep pushing that as we have here at the G20. We're going to keep pushing that at COP. We're going to be leaning in on making sure that ambition continually scales up because the science demands it and our citizens demand it.
Heather Schofield from the Toronto Star. On the economic recovery, I mean, Canadians are paying through the nose right now to fill up their cars with gas and paying high prices, as are people around the world. And so what kind of assurances can they take from this meeting today that inflation and high energy prices will somehow be brought into some kind of order?
Well, I think one of the things that we recognized around the G20 table is that the disruption of COVID-19 goes beyond the loss of life and the momentary disruption of our economies because of shutdowns. The challenges to global supply chains, the challenges to so many different pressures in the global economy has resulted in inflation around the world, in increasing pressures as our economies start up again with shortages, and that's something that we've committed to continue to work on. As a government, our focus is on reducing costs for Canadians. That's why we're moving forward with universal $10 a day childcare. That's why we're moving forward to tackle the housing crisis. That's why we will continue to step up on making sure life is affordable for Canadians.
So as a follow-up, can you do you have any frustration about the pressure to bring down gas and oil prices, and at the same time, how do you reconcile that with also the commitment to bring down emissions at the same time?
I think one of the things that it really shows is that we need to invest more in renewables. We need to be thinking creatively and determinedly about ways to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. There's still a long ways to go before we can reduce significantly or get to net zero, which we've committed to by 2050. But in the meantime, the investments in technology and innovation, pricing mechanisms like the price on pollution that Canada put in that encourages people to look for alternatives that get them off fossil fuels are the kinds of things that we need to continue to push at home and around the world, at the same time as we are making sure that people can afford to heat their homes and get around. That's where investments in public transit that we've been making over the many past years, investments in more zero-emission vehicles, as Canada is focused on, committed to 100% new vehicle sales being zero emission by 2035. These are all things that will get us through these challenges.
Précisément, M. Trudeau, c'est Madeleine Plémorin de Radio-Canada. Précisément, le langage plus fort dans le communiqué, vous vouliez le voir où? Qu'est-ce qui aurait fait la différence?
J'aurais aimé que tout le monde reconnaisse qu'il faut garder l'augmentation de température mondiale à 1,5 degré. Le Canada et particulièrement nos régions nordiques, arctiques, sont en train de se chauffer encore plus rapidement que la normale. Nous sommes préoccupés par cette réalité. Donc, j'aurais aimé un engagement plus ferme à ce niveau-là. J'aurais aimé un engagement plus ferme pour faire comme le Canada et se commettre à net zéro d'ici 2050. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec nos partenaires. Nous aurions aimé que plus de pays s'engagent à éliminer les centrales de charbon dans les années à venir, comme le Canada a fait. On va être là pour les aider à le faire, même s'ils n'ont pas fait d'engagement direct aujourd'hui.
En anglais, là-dessus, s'il vous plaît.
I think there's a number of things we would have liked to see even stronger, because we know that we always need to push harder on doing more on fighting climate change, whether it was a firmer commitment to recognize that we have to keep global temperatures at 1.5 degrees to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, whether it's a recognition that getting to net zero by 2050 is going to be really important, or whether it's recognizing that we need to get off of coal even quicker. These are the kinds of things that Canada is going to continue to push for alongside all our colleagues. Not everyone around the table was there today, and we're a group that works on consensus as much as possible, but we're going to continue fighting for a better future for all.
Une fois que vous avez dit ça, M. Trudeau, est-ce que vous évaluez que le G20 vient de tirer la COP 26 vers le bas ou vers le haut?
Je pense que ce G20 a illustré les défis qui nous attendent à la COP 26. Il y a bien des pays qui, comme le Canada, sont en train de pousser encore plus fort pour en faire plus, pour lutter contre les changements climatiques, et nous allons continuer de le faire, particulièrement sur des enjeux comme le charbon et le méthane. Mais il y a aussi beaucoup de pays en voie de développement qui sont préoccupés par le fait que des engagements qui ont été pris à Paris en 2015 n'ont pas été entièrement respectés. On n'est pas rendu encore à 100 milliards de dollars par année en financement pour le climat. Le Canada est en train justement de travailler avec l'Allemagne pour y arriver, pour encourager les gens, et on va s'y approcher. Mais il y a toujours plus à faire, et je pense que les gens savent que c'est l'attitude qu'on devait prendre et qu'on allait toujours prendre en rentrant à Glasgow demain.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, just before you came out, we heard from a member of the Indian cabinet, and he said he saw the net zero commitment as a global aggregate, and that it's incumbent on developed nations to go into negative emissions to offset those from the developing world that are still, as we know, even under this agreement, still going to continue to burn coal. Do you see Canada as having to go into negative by 2050 in order to effectively subsidize China and India?
2050 is a long way off, and what I know of Canadians and what I know of the opportunities that come with decarbonization, with innovation, with transforming our energy mix, as we approach 2050, I am sure that we will have developed many, many ambitious technologies that will allow us to go further faster. Our commitment is around getting net zero by 2050. But in order to reach that for the world, we're going to have to continue to work with countries like India and others that need to continue to power their economies, but need to do it in cleaner and cleaner ways, and quite frankly, can't do it without substantial investment and partnership from developed countries around the world.
You had a brief chat with President Biden today. Can you describe that? Tell us what you talked about with him?
It was we had a couple of warm exchanges. I thanked him for the hard work that he and his team and all of us had done to get the two Michaels returned to Canada. That was actually a theme that I spent a lot of time recognizing the leadership by many, many allies of continually bringing up the issue of coercive detention, arbitrary detention, the issue of the Michaels in their conversations. So it was certainly something I wanted to mention to Joe. I also talked about how we need to continue to work together on big issues like trade, whether it be in our auto sector, whether it be other issues. There's lots for us to do, and I look forward to keep working with him on it, as well as having a number of great conversations with him and others, including John Kerry, his special envoy on climate, on how we're going to make sure that the world steps up together at COP in Glasgow.
Eric Reguly with the Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, what do you consider the single biggest win from the G20 that you can take into Glasgow, if any?
I think, first of all, just having been able to sit down with the 20 largest economies in the world and really lean in on the issue of climate, to hear the ambition from so many of us around the table and see the challenges posed by others who are saying, you know what, we need more help on this, we need more help on that. Anytime the leaders of the world are able to gather, particularly after this pandemic year, once again in person and actually get into it together and talk about this existential threat to all of us that is climate change, is itself a win. And the fact that we have well laid out the table and know where the sharp edges are and know what work we're going to have to do at COP, which we were always going to have to do, is a very positive step.
Follow-up question. Was there much talk at the summit about ending the private financing of coal plants? We've got the public financing done, but what about the private?
I think there are, as one might imagine, a range of views around the world on how quickly we are going to be able to move beyond coal. There were a number of countries that highlighted that, particularly coming out of this pandemic with economic growth bouncing back, there are real energy challenges they're facing, and with regret, they're going to have to continue to step up their use of coal. And they're basically saying, look, we want to do less, but we can't if we want to keep our economies running. We need help from those countries that have contributed most to climate change with industrialization to get beyond it. And that's very much the tenor of the conversation we've been having.
Thank you.
Hi, Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. Before this summit, there was a hope that you would get the 1.5 degree commitment. There was a hope that you would also get net zero by 2050, not mid-century, and that you would phase out coal power by a certain date, not just sort of at some point. How does this actually move those agreements forward if the language is still so similar to what was there before? How is this actually progress?
I think every time we get together and get to challenge each other and put forward ambition and hear the obstacles that various countries are facing, we do move the yardsticks forward. They don't always get fully recognized in a consensus-based communique, but I can say that the work that was done here, the ability to come together and dig in on these things and look each other in the eyes physically for the first time in over a year and a half to actually talk about how we're going to address this extraordinary challenge for our world was certainly an important part, not just of the path towards Glasgow tomorrow, but the path towards a better future for us all.
You said earlier that you work by consensus and not everyone was around the table. Not everyone's going to be around the COP table either. So how would we expect any difference to come from COP if the same people who weren't here today are still missing?
This is part of the challenge we're facing as a world, where there are some countries that understand and are ready to step up in really big ways on fighting climate change, and others who have a number of different reasons why they don't feel yet they can. What COP is going to do is continue to lay forward the path based on science that we need to take as a world, and continue to put pressure through global action, through international pressure, through individuals holding their governments to account in many parts of the world, continue to step up. It is a challenging process to shift the trajectory of the world off of fossil fuels and onto more renewables and reduce our carbon emissions. But it is hard work that is being done by people here today, by people in Scotland, by people all around the world that we are committed to as a G20 and as a world.
Hi, Prime Minister. David Cochrane, CBC News. When you were challenged on your climate plan at The Hague, you said countries shouldn't make commitments and that they can't keep. But yet the G20 is committed to 1.5 degrees warming without a coal reduction deadline and without a net zero commitment firm deadline. Has the G20 just made a commitment that it can't keep?
The G20 is not a government, David. The G20 is a collection of separate governments that all make commitments to their own citizens, to Paris targets, to targets that will be brought forward again and in Scotland, and every country will be responsible for living up to those targets. We've recognized we have to have the ambition of 1.5 degrees. Canada, since 2015, has done significant steps to not just have strong targets, but actually have concrete plans to reach those targets. And that's what we're going to continue to do, even as we encourage other countries not just to set targets, but to have concrete plans to set those targets. One of the things that actually I found very encouraging was the level of interest countries around the world are showing in the way Canada succeeded in putting a price on pollution. The fact that we have a strong, broad-based carbon tax that's going up to $170 by 2030 as a clear signal to the private sector, to citizens, to all of us that we need to be thoughtful about reducing our carbon emissions at the same time as we've created a model that actually returns more money to the pockets of the average families in the place where the carbon price is in effect, and therefore we're able to win an election or two on the issue of carbon pricing, was an encouragement to many places around the world that maybe we need to look carefully at what Canada has done, because if, quite frankly, the entire G20 were to take on a similarly stringent carbon price to what Canada has done, we'd be well on our way beyond 2 degrees, closer to 1.5, without doing anything else, and we know there's lots more to do.
You talked about the importance of moving the yardstick and making progress at these things. Will you be moving the yardstick on Canada's climate ambitions when you go to Scotland over the next couple of days? Will you be announcing specific new measures to enhance Canada's climate efforts?
We will be talking about new commitments we're making. We know we have to continue to step up in our ambitions, but our new NDCs that we announced on Earth Day a few months ago will continue to hold the 40 to 45 degrees below 2005 levels by 2030. It's an ambitious target, extremely ambitious target for Canada, but one that we will be able to meet because we have put in place so many strong measures that will take us in that right direction. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.